Have you ever been told that you're too much? Do you leave social situations with racing thoughts of, why did I say that? Or did I take it too far? Again? For a lot of people with ADHD, socializing becomes exhausting because you're either masking hard or you're replaying the moment that you realize that you steamrolled the conversation. That's because ADHD can amplify how intensely we experience social connection, from impulsive talking and missing cues to heightened sensitivity to how people respond. The good news is you can lower the intensity without shrinking yourself and learn a few skills that make socializing easier, more natural, and on your terms. So today we're going to talk about why socializing can feel so overwhelming for those with ADHD and how to build skills that let you connect without burning out or shutting yourself down. This is ADHD where we talk about everyday life and ADHD. I'm your host, Dr. J. I'm a licensed psychologist who works with those with ADHD. If you're avoiding plans because socializing feels too stressful, this episode is for you. And honestly, it's for me too, because I know all about this intimately. I'm about as introverted as you can get. So let's talk specifically about how ADHD affects social interactions. Social tact is a learned skill for anybody, but it's particularly challenging for people with ADHD, where differences in the regulation of emotions, attention, and impulses clash with what we would call socially acceptable behaviors. A dual diagnosis of ADHD and autism can further complicate these interactions. Let's look at how the symptoms of ADHD and AuDHD can intensify a social experience. The first thing I want to talk about is hyperactivity. Studies show that individuals with ADHD have underactivation in brain regions that are responsible for inhibition of motor responses. Physical fidgeting can be distracting, while rapid speech and topic jumping creates exhaustion for listeners. Research shows that individuals with ADHD often speak more rapidly and switch topics more frequently than neurotypical individuals. This basically means that your hyperactivity sets an unintentional tempo others may struggle to match. Now we're going to talk about hyperfocus. So hyperfocus is intense, sustained attention on preferred activities. And this often occurs because these provide sufficient dopamine to maintain engagement. When directed at passions and conversations, self-monitoring decreases. You may not notice you've been speaking for 20 minutes or that the listener is ready to move on. Now let's talk about inattention and difficulty reading social cues. Research shows that individuals with ADHD struggle with social cognition. So this is accurately interpreting social cues, facial expressions, and conversation dynamics. This is a performance deficit, not a knowledge deficit. You might miss signals like glazed eyes, conversational cues that someone's ready to share, or that the topic is exhausted. With divided attention and limited working memory, you may not process those cues in real time. Now let's talk about distractibility. Attentional distractibility is well documented in ADHD. In conversation, your brain may wander even when you want to stay focused. Zoning out while someone talks can be socially damaging. When people realize that their partner isn't listening, trust and rapport can decrease. The painful irony is that you genuinely care, but your brain's attentional system isn't cooperating. Now let's talk about oversharing. Oversharing happens through impulsivity. What I mean by that is you're sharing before your internal editor confirms that it's appropriate. There's also difficulty reading cues about intimacy levels, anxiety-driven talking, and speed running to deep connections very quickly. Now let's talk about impulsivity. Impulsivity in ADHD stems from reduced prefrontal cortex activity, which is basically the brain's braking system. Blurting and interrupting occur because your brain generates a thought and words come out before you can ever stop them. Research shows that frequent interrupting are among some of the most frustrating conversation behaviors. For you, if you don't speak immediately, the thought vanishes. For listeners, it signals disrespect. Let's move on to forgetfulness. Working memory deficits are core to ADHD. This usually creates a couple different patterns. Interrupting because you fear forgetting your point, and also struggling with planning commitments, either forgetting entirely or becoming too rigid to compensate. When you forget or constantly interrupt, others may perceive it as not caring when you're actually fighting your own neurology. Now let's talk about rejection-sensitive dysphoria, or RSD. RSD is a term widely discussed in ADHD communities, but it's not an official DSM-5 diagnosis, and research specifically on this construct is limited and emerging. What is well established is that individuals with ADHD experience greater emotional reactivity to social feedback, higher rates of social rejection, and emotional dysregulation as a core feature. Clinically, many report intense responses to perceived rejection, interpreting neutral interactions as rejection, and also experiencing overwhelming shame from criticism and becoming hypervigilant in social situations. This heightened emotional response makes every social situation feel high stakes. If you're constantly feeling out of step or misunderstood, your self-esteem can plummet. Shame can color every social interaction and prompt you to mask your ADHD symptoms. Masking makes even simple interactions more emotionally demanding, which further intensifies social anxiety and exhaustion. You might prefer to avoid socializing altogether, which leads to isolation, and then all of your social skills get rusty and the cycle repeats. The good news is the cycle is breakable, and a few practical skills can make social situations feel less intense. Let's get into what helps, because understanding why is crucial, but you also need concrete strategies. These aren't about fixing yourself or changing who you are as a person. They're about building scaffolding that support your unique brain's functioning so you can engage in ways that are meaningful to you. First, I want to talk about open communication. Disclosing your ADHD can improve relationship quality when it's done thoughtfully. Be specific. I have ADHD, which means I sometimes interrupt because I'm worried I'll forget my thought. Please let me know if this is happening and getting in the way of us communicating effectively. You want to invite feedback without defensiveness, but avoid making your diagnosis your entire personality. In reciprocal relationships with individual others or communities, give and take is required. Every new environment that I go into, I let people know that I'm introverted, and it's led to an overall reduction in people misunderstanding my behaviors. I also know that as an introvert, I have to expand my capacity and skill set in order to do my part in these interactions as well. Now let's talk about active listening. One thing you may want to try is mindful pausing before speaking. So you can do this by counting to 3 or taking one breath. Another tip here is paraphrasing what someone said, because it forces you to process and it also shows engagement, and also doing appropriate eye contact. Though for some neurodivergent individuals, this can actually impair listening. So you really want to focus on what works for you. Start small. Practice in one conversation per day rather than implementing all strategies at once. Now I want to talk about environmental modifications. You may want to choose quieter venues for important conversations when possible. Use fidget tools or suggest walking meetings. Practice slow breathing, something like the 4-7-8 technique, to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and calm impulsive urges. This is a suggestion that I give all the time for general communication or conflict. For example, for the couples that I work with where one or both parties have ADHD, we discuss ways to have productive conflict. A deep conversation out of quote unquote nowhere with the TV blasting, dishwasher whirring, and cats playing in the background might be too much, which can lead to poor engagement with or outcomes from the conversation. In this scenario, you might say, "Hey, can I get 2 minutes to transition into this conversation? And can we turn off the TV or have it in another room?" Now let's get into self-awareness and real-time acknowledgement. So for example, when you interrupt someone, you might want to pause and say, "I'm sorry I interrupted you. Please continue." Acknowledged interruptions are far less damaging than unacknowledged ones. You may also want to sometimes name patterns preemptively. "I'm worried I'm going into hyperfocus mode. Please let me know if I need to pause." This does require the very self-monitoring ADHD makes difficult. So it's all about practice, not perfection. But that also means that you can't avoid social situations. You want to use them as a learning environment. As I always say, trial and tweak, rinse and repeat. Now let's talk about external scaffolding. You want to use reminders religiously. Set multiple alerts for social commitments. Take notes during conversations if it's appropriate. Before committing to plans, check your calendar and your energy levels. Practice saying, "Let me check and get back to you," and then set a reminder for that. Which leads into energy management. Social interaction is neurologically more demanding for you. Pre-assess your capacity before saying yes. Give yourself outs. Schedule recovery time after social events for solitude and decompression. Consider shorter, more frequent interactions versus marathon events. You don't have to stay at the party for 5 hours. You can go for an hour and see them next week. And it wouldn't be a Dr. J episode if I didn't talk about self-compassion. Research shows self-compassion is associated with overall better mental health outcomes. Acknowledge mistakes without catastrophizing. You better celebrate those small wins. And understand that building new skills takes time and progress is not linear. Being kind to yourself isn't self-indulgent. Kindness also means continuing to try for yourself and for what matters to you. You don't have to shut yourself out from a vibrant social life because you have ADHD. With mindfulness and practice, you can socialize on your own terms and become more flexible to others. There are so many people who will work with you as long as you're willing to do the same for them. They may not be the loudest in the room. It might take some time for you all to find each other. But like I tell my patients all the time, a good friend or partner isn't going to just appear in your apartment. You have to go on a journey. Learn to own who you are. And to be clear, only one aspect of that is ADHD. Take off your mask. You're lovely, and there are plenty of people who will see it. That's it for this episode of ADHD And. If you found this helpful, check out our episode on ADHD and oversharing, where I explain why oversharing happens with ADHD and how to manage those urges to share too much information. Thanks so much for joining me, and make sure to subscribe for more ADHD resources and support like this.